Hey folks, this summer we asked 1,000 artists if they wanted to learn Unreal Engine in 4 weeks, and boy did they ever! Feast your eyes on some of the incredible projects that came out of Escape's most ambitious bootcamp to date in our Summer of Unreal Sizzle, now on the Unreal Engine YouTube channel. One of the most common questions we hear about digital twins is, how do I get started? While a digital twin is usually a large-scale project, there are many steps you can take right away. Explore our guide on the Unreal Engine feed to learn how to start prototyping today. With Unreal Engine 4.27, both the Path Tracer and GPU Lightmass received enhancements. The Path Tracer makes it viable to create final pixel output, typically reserved for offline renderings, and GPU Lightmass reduces the time needed to bake your lighting in complex scenes. Check out the brief overview of these updated features to 4.27 on the YouTube channel as well. And now over to this week's top karma earners. Many thanks to Everynone, Shadow River, Clockwork Ocean, Bobcat, Bots U1E, Powell, JNat, Miyagi1, Dokoro36, and Terry Shrimp. On to this week's community spotlights. Jay Hill is showing off his character creating muscles with Plex, a spunky cyborg. Created to play with features in Unreal Engine, head over to his ArtStation page to see how the mighty Plex was developed and see more of their outstanding artistry. Congrats to Impact Games! After 14 years in the making, Hanako, Honor & Blade officially released Into the Wild. Developed as a passion project to remember those lost to cancer, take up arms to cleanse the scourge of Japan to restore peace and beauty to the land. Download Hanako, Honor & Blade on Steam now. And coming next year, take a look at Icelandic studio Parady's Island of Winds, an adventure set in a fantastical 17th century Iceland. Assume the role of Brynhild, the Balance Keeper, who sets out on a journey of discovery where she'll face creatures of legend and challenging puzzles. Stay up to date on their development at islandofwinds.com. Thanks for watching this week's news and community spotlight.
Hey. Oh. My audio is not coming through.
How about now? Sorry about
Welcome
that,
to
folks.
Inside Unreal.
We're doing it live. Okay. How about now? Yeah. All right, good. Thanks, everyone. It's always an exciting start to our Wednesdays, or Thursdays. Well, let's nail it. Again, welcome to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. As I said, I'm your host, Amanda Shade, and we're really excited to bring the team from Moving Pieces on the show today. So we have Patrick Macavina, president. Oh, and Kyle Erf, director of technology.
Hey there.
So, if you all are unfamiliar, Moving Pieces team is, the creators of two really awesome games. So we have Dodo Peak, which is your vibrant, I would say retro platformer. And then you're currently working on Shoulders of Giants, the action roguelike, which seems to feature the friendship or at least camaraderie between a frog and a robot. We're really excited to hear not only how you got started as a studio, but it sounds like there are some much requested how-tos that you're going to be sharing with us later today.
Excited to show those off, yes. Awesome. So yeah, Amanda, thanks so much for having us. We're really excited to be here and to share a couple of projects and just like our general game dev history with everyone. To start things off, just to tell you a little bit about the studio, we started off in 2019 with Dodo Peak, which, as Amanda said, is like a retro arcade platformer, which is out on Apple Arcade and Nintendo Switch. And Dodo Peak actually started as my first game project ever in 2017, I didn't have any programming or game development experience. I had like tinkered around in Unreal like a little bit and did like a couple like really, you know, interesting first projects that I won't show anyone.
Like
Maybe I will. We'll
prototypes.
see. Yeah, prototypes. Just kind of like learning and seeing what I can do. I did have a lot of experience as a 3D artist, like working in commercials and visual effects. So I did, you know, understand like how 3D works and all that stuff. So that definitely helped me out. You know, starting to learn Unreal. But because of my lack of game development experience and also programming experience, everyone tells you like, okay, when you make your first game, you should make it really simple. You should have a very small scope. So I tried to do that. Tried to do something that I was excited about making, but also I felt like I could make.
Yeah.
So I started developing Dota Peak with a friend, James, who did a lot of the design and UI and characters. We collaborated on the game design. And I was, like I said, I was actually the only developer and programmer on the project up until 2019 when we brought Kyle on board. Dota Peak, interestingly, was actually started as a AR game. We were really excited about like Apple's AR kits. We're like, okay, maybe we could do something in AR. I don't know if it's easy to transition to my screen, but I do have like a picture of the early AR demo. If we could show that. Yeah,
Also-
awesome. So yeah. So this was like the crazy, like, you know, you could play Dota Peak on the floor in the living room. Sorry, Kyle, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, like, I don't know if we played the teaser yet, so if we want to also provide like a before. and
Oh
after.
yeah, that's probably smart. Yeah, actually, if we could go ahead and play the teaser now, that's probably or the trailer. That's probably a good place to do it.
Straightforward game with influences in like the arcade platformers of the 1980s.
It seemed like it translated to that AR experience pretty well, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, you know, like I've just kind of always been fascinated with like, okay, like little worlds. You could just like look at them and move around, and like it kind of seemed like it made sense. You know, like some of the challenges with this like game mode was like we wanted to ship with like an AR mode, like, and also like a normal mode that you could play on your phone. So because of this like 360-degree level, and you could the camera like kind of like swam around. It was like a little vomity. So when people played that, they were like, I don't know if this actually makes for like a really good like normal game. It's cool in VR or in AR. So we actually decided, you know, just like cut the scope and let's just make it like a, you know, a non-AR game and just like take it where we can. So in 2019, we actually had the opportunity to scale up the team, add a lot more content and polish to the game. And at the time, there were a lot of like technical challenges that I was already facing with my lack of programming experience. So I actually took a Unity course, which is where I met Kyle, ironically. And I could see that he was like actually a really, really good programmer. So I bought him a pumpkin spice latte at Starbucks, and I sat him down, and I was like, you should join our team, and you should make this game really cool. And if we can, actually, I'm going to open up the editor now. I have, if we can just switch to my screen. Yeah, so with a long project, like, you know, it had been in development for about a year and a half, and like I said before, I didn't really have a lot of programming experience, so this is kind of what happens. So this is like basically like the player controller, like we call it like the mother blueprint, where basically a lot of the like player logic happens. So as you can see, it's like there's definitely a little bit of spaghetti going on. So when Kyle started, I think he kind of had to like make some decisions, like, okay, like, do we clean up some of the
Right.
code, or like, there's a lot of moving things going here. Do we like just keep adding features to the game, or like, what do we do? So yeah, Kyle, what was like your kind of onboarding experience like?
Well, I mean, look at this, Pat. What do you think?
Yeah, true.
So I first of all, I like that you're showing this, because this is, when people, I want this to be sort of unfiltered, and I really like, there's another Inside Unreal with the Mortal Shell people, who, it's a really great one. People should check it out. I mean, keep watching this stream, but after that. And they show some stuff that's like blueprints that you wouldn't normally show in a talk of like, but like this all shipped, and what Patrick had on his screen is now all shipped. So like coming on, I should say a couple things just for some more context. Like when I came onto the project, there was maybe, I think we were like 3 months and some change away from like when we needed this out. So what, like the challenges that you, or like the approach you have to take when you're in that sort of situation is less like, if I had a year, yeah, we'd probably rewrite a lot of the code, but because there were like all these requirements, and I'll get to those requirements in a second, you kind of just like leave what works. And as hard as Patrick's like initial code is to follow, like it works, and God bless him, he figured out a lot just for someone who didn't know how to program. And I'm actually curious, Patrick, how did you like learn any of this stuff? Because you did blueprints, you also learned some C++, which you had never done before.
I did. I actually ended up writing my first code on the project. Like a lot of the enemies were all like originally in Blueprint, but they were like very buggy. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take this upon myself. I'm going to like learn C++ and rewrite these in code. And they actually ended up working pretty good. And we still use that code today in the game that shipped. But interestingly, like one of the early challenges, and Kyle can speak to this part, like I was saying before, is like some of the pathfinding, since this is not like, I wasn't using the character component, this is like on a grid, there wasn't like any really kind of out of the box solution for like AI pathfinding to really work. So I came up with like a kind of a not really great solution that worked most of the time, but like as we started designing more levels, it became kind of a bottleneck. So one of the first things that Kyle did was he actually helped solve this problem. And Kyle, you can probably explain a bit more about
how you
approached it.
Let's throw up my screen. So I think I have yours up here. I have like 3 Unreal projects open. Sweet. If anyone has any questions, this editor is Rider by JetBrains, by the way. Highly recommend it. You can talk more about that if people want to know, but it's a good drop-in replacement for using Visual Studio to edit Unreal code. So Patrick wrote this thing called Set Smart Path, which, like, Patrick knew what pathfinding was, but he's not like a game developer. And I should say my background was also not in games development. We kind of just hit the ground running there. But I've been just a normal programmer for the last decade or so. And I wanted to get into games. I wanted to do something more creative. That's always been sort of the dream. So anyway, coming onto this, I was familiar with things like A-Star and stuff, but Patrick solved pathfinding the way that like a person who's just kind of figuring this out on their own might, which I actually, again, I'm pretty impressed with what he came up with.
Hey, I'm just curious, do you have an example of that, like level 7, I think? I think that might be like interesting context.
Yeah, so like a big issue we had with the game was when you start, like, all the eggs come out and go to where the eggs are supposed to go. And they use this very basic pathfinding. And so you couldn't do something like this where they come out of the level and then, like, fly all the way around and come up on the other side. Let me just play that again. So we needed, like, actual pathfinding. We couldn't just, like, try and move in the direction you're supposed to move. But what Patrick came up with... this is a little grid. This is a tool called Snip and Sketch. It's like a Windows screenshot tool. It's probably the most useful tool in game development. Unreal Engine is also pretty good, but Snip and Sketch is really useful. So this is like just a grid. I think this might be like a guinea pig cage or something, but it's good for our purposes. So say we have like some obstacles in the world, and let's put some here. black is obstacles, and then this nice gold color, that's like our target where we're trying to go. And so let's say you were like pathfinding. Patrick's code that I had up earlier basically tries to go towards something, and if it can't go towards something, it goes another direction, and it avoids going to places that it's been before, which is a pretty reasonable way to like try and get through the world, frankly. So that might look a little something like this, where you're coming in from the top, and you're trying to get to this point here, and you get down, you hit this juncture here, you can no longer go forward any further, so that's out. You try to go, it's also to the right of you, so you try to go to the right, that's out. And you're like, what are my other options? Well, I've already been up, so I go this way. And then it's like, okay, well, now I can go down, so I'll go down. I can't go to the right. Left makes absolutely no sense, and I can't go up because I've already been up, so I go down and then to the right, and then you kind of follow through. And that pathfinding actually works really well if there's like sparse things, and it's just a total like layman solution, and I think it's really cool. But that doesn't work for like actually solving a maze. So what people usually think we did here to get these eggs to like fly around this path as well as they do is you implement something like A star. But the solution we actually went with is a simple breadth first search. For those who aren't familiar with that, there's a million explanations online, but basically cube BFS. Oh man, my shortcut didn't work. But basically, you're, instead of doing anything directed based on the like position of do anything directed like based on like where you're trying to get, you just sort of like go in every direction like one layer at a time. And I can pull the code up for that. It's probably like not the most interesting thing in the world for someone to just stare at the code, but the benefits of doing breadth first search versus a something smarter is like the simplicity is useful first of all for modeling in your head, so it's just easier to like understand exactly what the code is doing. Second of all, it's a lot easier to change and add things to, so we eventually added here we go. We eventually added like these teleporters that move you from like one side of the level to the next, and those completely break locality. Those break like relative positions. So something like breadth first search is actually really good for finding those. And that's just sort of like one of the things we had to contend with. Patrick, is there anything else on that you wanted to touch on?
You know, I think it was just like really cool seeing this, like I was saying, like this is like I spent like a lot of time on this problem, and then Kyle comes in and he does it in like a couple hours, and then I was like, oh man, what else can this guy do? But no, it was I mean, creating like a solution like that, it's just like, you know, you don't want to be roadblocked by certain problems like that, so we were able to like actually make a lot more interesting levels having that like pathfinding implemented, which was really cool.
Oh, I will say, the reason that we even still have this old code is that we do still use it. And this goes also back into simplicity. Like the monkey AI, there's like these monkeys that will chase you in the game. It's kind of dumb, and it can, and that's like we kind of want it that way. So like having something that can move and get caught up in a maze-like situation is actually kind of okay for gameplay. And if you do research on like Pac-Man or, I mean, Pac-Man's there's like a ton of YouTube videos explaining the AI of Pac-Man. Like the ghosts don't all move in a way that is like perfect for catching you, right? It's more fun if they all do kind of different things. And this is sort of the same thing that we have going here, where like, yeah, this isn't perfect AI. We tried giving the monkeys perfect pathfinding, and it actually like wasn't fun to play at all. They were just too good. You just couldn't get any breathing room. So actually, like, kind of more naive solutions like this can be a really good choice for AI in a game like ours.
Awesome.
Right.
Yeah. I guess, Amanda, does anybody have any questions right now?
Yeah, so there's actually a few. So Saxum13 was wondering, how did you get past any like project breaking hurdles or that you may have countered? Because you are working with a small team, so you don't have tons of people you can go
Yes.
pester for help. So how do you
Yeah.
overcome them?
No, this is
Well,
this.
That's a
Go
really
ahead.
good one. I want Kyle to take this mostly. I just want to set it up and say that, like, yeah, we were definitely a very small team, and like we basically released on Apple Arcade, which is essentially like releasing on 3 platforms and supporting a bunch of different SDKs like iCloud and different types of input devices. So Kyle, when he came on, his big decision was like, let's tackle the unknowns first, as opposed to like tackling them last. But I'll let you speak to that more, Kyle.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a very prescient question because like everything broke. The gameplay was like solid. Like the game was working, and that's like when I came on when the game was working, which is in some ways a huge privilege because I didn't have to be there for like figuring out what is fun. But yeah, showing up. I had never used Unreal before. That's a huge other thing that I might touch on in a second is like how to get situated with Unreal. But to answer this question, you gotta first of all definitely start on things that you aren't sure are going to work as soon
Yeah,
as
like
is reasonable.
identify the things that you're most like unsure about first, and then I think that's the most important first step too.
Yeah. So like when I came on, the first thing I did was like, let's get this working on Apple TV, right? Like let's at least make it run on Apple TV.
Because
And
up until that point, it had
yeah,
just ran on phones essentially.
yeah. So we did that, and that hit a blocker right away, if I recall correctly, Pat. Like it just like
it crashed.
it would just crash, it crashed immediately.
Oh, no.
So
it's like getting like
yeah.
stable builds on all the platforms you're going to ship on first is like, it's pretty important.
Yeah. So and this was like literally over 2 years ago. I think I'm remembering correctly. Like it was some setting with like the rendering that just didn't work on Apple TV.
Yeah,
and
it was like
the way we figured that out,
shader setting
yeah.
or something. Yeah.
And the way we figured that out was like starting a new project that was just empty and see if we can get that to run on Apple TV. And we could.
Right. That's always a smart technique.
Yeah, it's a great feeling when that works. It's also a horrible feeling because it means like now you have to figure out what the heck the difference is, which could be
project.
Yeah,
right. What's wrong with our project? Oh no.
Could be literally thousands of things. So I think we're eventually like manually diffing like project settings.
Yeah. And we found out that Unreal doesn't actually work with extinct animals, so that was the biggest problem.
Okay.
but no, thank you for asking that question.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah. So from HP Plus, they're wondering, how did you go about actually funding your game as a small studio? Did you do Kickstarters or work with a publisher?
Yeah.
So what was your experience like?
Yeah, it's like, that's a really good question. It's it's one of the most important things that independent developers face. For a long time, I basically like freelanced, and then I would like take time off to work on the game. But then we weren't able to like scale up the team that way, so we went around and we just kind of like pitched the game to publishers and investors, and we ended up finding a partner that was into it, and that's kind of what worked for us. But I think that's generally, it's not super easy, but I think that's most of the approach that people take. There's also Kickstarter and stuff like that, and other like crowdfunding methods as well.
Yeah, I would say like the vast majority of the game's development was quote unquote self-funded, or like whatever you'd want to say.
Yeah.
Just like Patrick working, like instead of doing like paying jobs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Watching the savings go down a little bit, but it all ended up working out. So I'm happy I did it.
Still sort of on the biz side of having a game, David Ricardo was asking, how did you build up your audience for it? So what kinds of marketing or advertising did you do to reach players?
Yeah, That's something we didn't do a lot of, unfortunately, because we didn't have a lot of experience in that realm. I mean, we got really lucky in the sense where, if you can get the platform you're releasing on to help you out in any way, that's like huge. So luckily, like launching on Apple Arcade, the game was in front of a lot of people, and we didn't really have the resources to do much more than that. But I think that helped us immensely. It's something that we're starting to work with more now on our next project, and they say like you should start marketing your game like right when you start making it, which I think to a certain extent that's true. As the game evolved, we tried to like basically add in features to the game that people could kind of like share and compete with. So we ended up adding like some weekly challenges and daily activities and stuff like that to kind of encourage like some social aspects of the game, and I think that did help us as well.
Okay, great. It's good information. But yeah, we always say it's like definitely don't forget about marketing. Don't leave it at the end. Whatever platforms you're shipping on, if you can reach out to them. Obviously, if you're making something in Unreal, let us know what you're working on. There's lots of different avenues for that. But you can make the best game in the world, but if nobody hears about it, then unfortunately, then nobody plays it. And so it's like really make sure you're getting the word out there.
You want to get the word out there for sure.
Absolutely. A little more technical, Yotaku14 is wondering, how do you approach making tools for building like your grid-based levels?
Oh, okay.
That's a great question.
I could show just a very quick.
The answer might surprise you. How?
It's very simple. So Unreal has this lovely grid snapping tool. So basically, everything's like 100 by 100 in our world, right? We like predefine that. So like when the character moves, it jumps by like 100 units in like up, down, left, or right. So we basically have on grid snapping at 100, and then we just like we have basically we call this like our cube element. So it has like all the game logic for like a grid. It has like I could click an obstacle so the player can't go there, and it will just basically add in like a tree in this instance. I can override it and change it to something else. We have, so like if I move this around, move it over here, I've just added another one. And then on that same cube actor, I have some other things I can say like, okay, I want a baby to spawn here. So when I click play, there'll be an egg that's there that the player has to get and bring back to the beginning. And then a couple other like technical art things like, spawning grass and stuff like that. But that's basically it. Is we kept it like really, really simple, and for us that seemed to like work pretty well. And James, who designed a lot of the levels, he didn't have any like Unreal or game development experience either, and he was kind of able to just use those simple tools, and like he did a lot of really cool level work with that.
Yeah, I'll say like I think the just having things be placeable like that was really helpful. From like a back-end standpoint, our like cube tiles themselves are like totally overloaded in the amount of logic in them, which is just sort of a symptom of like starting a game where you like have never programmed before. But it again still like works. But yeah, like basically the like navigation actually is built around like doing raycasts to figure out like where things are. So it's not, if I were to maybe start from scratch, I would maybe have things be more aware of like where they are on a grid that isn't like 3D space. But for like what it is, just like doing traces from the sky, essentially, just like from above, to figure out what's next to you is like, that's how this works. And the upside is there's no calculating some sort of back end view of things. There's no like simplified view that can get out of sync with the real world. And again, it works. Like I'm always surprised at how much some of these things, like the bottleneck in this game is always the GPU. It's never the CPU. And it like runs well on like 10-year-old phones and stuff. So seemingly that approach was fine.
Yeah, well, and kind of based on your comment, there was another question from DC147. What is the one thing you would change about your development project now that you're on the other side? What would you have changed about your approach, or do you feel like are some of the lessons that you're taking into your
I have
next
probably a
project.
different answer than Kyle does, but I'll just say
Well, you
mine.
can
I
each,
would have.
you can each answer.
Okay, I would have brought Kyle on sooner. That would have been my
Oh, that's so kind of
change.
you.
Oh. More resources sooner.
Oh, is that your whole answer?
That's my answer.
That's fair.
Yeah. So my suggestion to all of you is to hire me. So what I would do is probably, I mean, we could give a 2-hour talk just on like what we shouldn't have done. I mean, I think the good news and the takeaway from all of this is like we made a ton of mistakes, and if I pull up like the mother blueprints, this is basically like pornographic. But if we cut to my screen, so let me just walk you through like how movement works. I'm not actually going to explain it because it'll take too long, but this is like, imagine you've never opened this project before. That won't be hard for anyone to imagine. None of you have opened this project before. So when I was trying to figure out like getting situated with the code base, first thing I tried to do is figure out like how does this bird move. So I found this like touch input node and just sort of followed that. And so it's like getting like locations on the screen and calculating a direction based on that. Pretty standard. And then it's just like keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And then now we're getting to like obstacle checks, and then it keeps going. And this is where we actually find the tile to jump to, and that keeps going. And then now we get to the actual animation. Timelines are great for simple movement like this. And then that's where like the animation happens. And that's like that runs the whole length of this window. So first off, I think all of the individual pieces here are not bad. But just like encapsulating the code is really useful, especially if you're going to be working with more than one person or even be working on a project for longer than a year. You're going to forget how things work. So, at the very least, every single, and like having functions is a great way to do that because you have to name the functions. So like if every one of these things was its own like function or like subgraph, just from an organizational standpoint, that would be really, really helpful. I know if people are more experienced and they're hearing my answer, they're like, yeah, duh. But like, it's useful. There's a reason you do it.
Yeah, but you may not be seeing it in chat, but folks are talking about how their blueprints look similar. They're just getting started and may also be in this state. And like, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to be super experienced or have a lot of skill with blueprint or programming in general to get off the ground. And I think that's an absolute testament. Like, you all released a game and it plays great. It works. It does all the things. It's on the platforms. And like, yeah,
no phone has caught fire that we're aware of. So that's a win.
Yeah. So it's definitely, blueprints. Also, I think, to Unreal's credit, I think a great way to learn programming. Like a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm not a programmer. It's like, you've written 2,000 like blueprint nodes. Like, that's programming, dude.
Yeah, it's basically, I mean, you're just like, don't have to worry about the syntax, but the logic's pretty, pretty similar.
So, you'll work with people, and like someone who has a stronger programming background will have a better intuition about like what to encapsulate. But I will say the reason that all this stuff is still so crufty and in there is like I said, I came on, we didn't have that much time left, and I think a experienced but not as experienced programmer might have done something like, oh, let's like rewrite this and make it really good and bug free.
Yeah, I was gonna say like,
yeah,
it's always nice like once you have like, you're kind of like, okay, this is a cool feature, like this is like, I'm happy with this. Take time then to go back and like, you should always try to work clean as you're going, but then you can take time to like refactor it a bit and to move on from there. I didn't do that as much as I should have, but that's definitely a good practice to get in the habit of. For
and Patrick's not on trial here, but so like that's good. And I think as I was saying, like a good programmer might have thought to do that, but if I had done that, we would not have shipped on time. Like that's the thing, right? This works. So I spent time like getting iCloud working, like making things package on Mac OS. There's a blog post. I won't go into the details because it doesn't show well on this stream. if you're interested in developing in the Apple ecosystem, there's a blog post I wrote for the Unreal Tech blog. If you just search for, I think it's, oh no, where did it go? It's like Unreal. If you search for
Unreal,
yeah, if you just Google Unreal Mac ecosystem, that's the blog post. And it has like code. It teaches you about Objective-C++, which is how you integrate with all those APIs. It teaches you about P-lists. And I don't think I'll go into that anymore unless people have questions on it on the stream, because it's really me just like listing off API names.
Well, we can pick up the post for folks and share that so that they can take the time to digest it, because I imagine there's, we do have other things we want to get to here, but there's
For sure.
certainly a lot of questions coming in. They're wondering, these are blueprints, but you left them as is. Lucas Machado was asking if you converted them to C++, or you left them, right?
So I could speak to that a bit. So the main actors in the project, you've got the player and you have the enemies, and those are probably the most complex, at least until Kyle got on board. I did end up rewriting the enemies in C++, kind of as like a challenge and exercise to myself, and since they were being used a lot, and I wanted some like level of inheritance, so I could like have like one kind of base enemy class, and then if we wanted like a certain type of enemy to have it inherit from that. So I felt like that was meaningful. So I think I don't know if there's like a hard and fast rule, but like for me that worked. And like if you're going to be reusing that a lot and a bunch of different actors, and you're going to have a lot of inheritance, I think, and you feel comfortable doing it, like and you're not a huge programmer, but someone that like wants to learn more, and you are up to the challenge, I think it's definitely worth doing.
Yeah, I think again, like if it works, there's like lots of ways to sort of move things, like move your code, your like current execution path, like back and forth between C++ and blueprints as is reasonable. I'm a huge fan of, even in our new project, Shoulders of Giants, making C++ blueprint nodes and just like chaining those together. So if there's something you're doing that's like data heavy, or like does a lot of data manipulation, or like a lot of like a graph search, like our pathfinding. Our pathfinding probably would have actually been slow if I did it in blueprints. Like it would have probably been a bottleneck. So things like that are really good candidates for C++. Anything that involves like a ton of for loops, basically.
Yeah. There's also certain
really
things that I ran into that weren't exposed, like as blueprints.
Right.
Like I wanted to change like the mobility of actors. I couldn't remember exactly why, but so I just went in and like made like my own like custom blueprint node, exposed that, and stuff like that is like really helpful and useful too.
Nice. This goes into your workflow a little bit. James D.K. Smith is wondering, do you have a general agile or waterfall development plan, or how did you any tips or suggestions on how to track your progress or the work that you're doing?
So we didn't but we do now.
I'll field this a little bit. So, man, this is always the eternal question. I've done like various amounts of project management as part of my like previous jobs. I'm like kind of the de facto like project manager in the studio at this point. Like, I'll make a Gantt chart now and again just to make sure we're not gonna like miss any important dates. I think for Dodo Peak, it was definitely more what you would call like waterfall. I mean, the 3 months I was on was basically agile, in that we were like, fix this bug. Oh my God, like we got to get this working. And so in that way, there was just like a constant undefined stream of work coming in. But I found, and I've been working in like various tech jobs for like about a decade now, and every team kind of finds a thing that works for them. There's no silver bullet. Usually everyone kind of ends up with a mix between like agile / like Scrum and like having more long-term planning and milestones. And I think especially for creative works like games, unless you're building a game that is in like a really fortunate place with early access or as a live service, I think you do have to have some amount of quote unquote like waterfall, which is where you're planning out like exactly what's going to happen. And this is just my opinion, but I think it's very useful to have like, okay, in 3 months, like this all needs to be done, or else like this can't happen. Especially with a small team, like we don't have the luxury of having like 7 people building out 7 different systems. Like it's me and Patrick building out all of the core systems on our current project, and then we have other people, but they're sort of like glomping onto those. So
Okay.
I realize that's like a tough question to answer. It's one of those
definitely a good
questions.
one,
If I had a perfect answer, like, then I would be, I don't know, I'd be famous, right? But
Any tools that
yeah.
you felt like helped your teams and as part of that process?
Oh, that's
Or-
a good question. So for Shoulders of Giants, we're using a lot of Trello just to keep track of like a stack of like work we need for a milestone, and I use this tool called Team Gantt,
Okay.
which is just a really good online app for just roughing out really ugly or not ugly if you put the time in charts that can help you schedule things. But mostly Slack, mostly just talking with Patrick. Again, part of the benefits of a small team is there's really never any confusion about what needs to get
Are
worked
you
on
doing this
next.
or not? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, well, one of us
exactly.
has to do it.
Yeah.
Kind of on workflows and things like that, and seeing that you don't have a team, like what about art? How are you creating these models or these assets for the project? Is that you, or are you
Yeah,
outsourcing it?
so we it was the same for Dota Peak. Like we have an art team. Like basically like prototyping Dota Peak. It was like me and then my friend James. James did a lot of the art. I did like the programming and so a good amount of art too. And then once we kind of had like a rough draft prototype, we decided that we wanted to find someone like an art director that could help us flesh out more of the art. So we found someone. His name's Max. He's amazing. And so we brought him on, and he's actually working with us on Shoulders of Giants now too. So we do have like an art team that is doing modeling, animation, concept art. But like kind of in the early part of Shoulders of Giants, we were like figuring out what it was before we kind of like, we only recently started like full production. That was basically like me and Kyle. We did have a little bit of help externally with art, but now we have like a lot more, which has been really great to see that progress.
Awesome. Well, I feel like this is a good spot to kind of move on to your next project.
Oh wait,
There's
no, I had one thing.
Oh, do you have other things you wanted to cover in Dota?
We deviated from the plan slightly, but people might find this interesting, and Patrick gets to show all the cool stuff in the half about Shoulders of Giants because he's the technical artist, and that stuff all shows really well. But we did have there's a feature in Dota Peak that's sort of like an endless runner mode that I think people might be interested in because I know people love proc gen. And people love like randomly generating
It's a hot topic
levels.
these days.
And it's one of the few things that I can talk about that like looks kind of cool. So if we cut to my screen really quickly, so this was sort of the last big feature we added to Dodo Peak, which is a mode that is basically you climb up this hill endlessly, and the goal rather than just saving all of your eggs, it's about collecting as many as you can and dropping them off at these points while the water is like slowly rising below you. So we're generating these hills that go on forever, and when there's no bugs, which there usually aren't anymore, you can just keep going essentially until, I don't know, you run out of battery. So I wanted to talk a little bit about like how we got to this point, because like you can see there's like kind of a mix of like existing structures and like random stuff here. And the feedback has actually been like really positive on it. For me personally, this is the only part of the game that I still like. But again, we've had the game out for 2 years. It's got 60 levels. Once you play test all those levels like 100 times, this is the only way.
Yeah, you kind of want something like fresh, and this was like even us like every time. Like one of the cool things I just wanted to say it real quick, Kyle, is like in our, so we have like a daily challenge and every player has basically uses the same seed for the level generation, so they can all play the same level every day. And then every day it's obviously a new seed, so it's basically a new level, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's weirdly one of the most gratifying feelings as a game developer is like me, like I won't think about Dodo Peak for a day or two, and I'll just like look at the like the daily challenge leaderboards, and there's people getting like super competitive on there, and that's really cool, right? Like people I didn't ask to play it, like that's neat. So I want
into like your levels were previously like explicitly designed, right? And then this is procedural. So what was the mindset and the approach to that?
What a perfect question. So there's a lot of people, there's a lot of great talks about endless procedural generation out there. I think the biggest piece of advice for anything, regardless of if it's a grid base, if it's an endless runner, if you're designing like No Man's Sky, is like figure out what is a good thing you're trying to generate, like what is a good version of that. For Dodo Peak, we were really lucky in that the game was already out for a year when we started doing this. So
we knew like what a good level was and like what was fun and what wasn't.
Yeah, so like the things you would say, like what makes a good level in an arcade platformer like Dodo Peak is having, a few critical paths and like little like offshoots and things to collect and enemies guarding like essential things, and like you build like an intuition about like what's fun. And so I set off on a quest at the end of last year to like figure that out. And I have the first thing I did in that process, and let's open up my screen again, because this is the stuff that no one's seen this before. I'm not even sure Patrick's seen a lot of this. So I'm a huge advocate of, if you're going to do any sort of bold change to your project, just like make a new game. Like not a new game, sorry, make a new like Unreal project. Like literally make a new game. Don't make a new game. You know what I mean.
Every time you make a new game,
So the same thing happens, and we can talk about this with like multiplayer and Shoulders of Giants, like making a new project to test certain things before you start like trying 3 different drafts in your actual code base. Like it's so much easier to just keep it all contained. So I made this level with these like really crappy default skin.
It's important to use programmer art too, I think. When you test stuff.
When the artists are away, Kyle's gonna play. So you can like make your own tree out of a cylinder and some cones, and like that's pretty fun. But even more fun than that.
Oh, is that the Unreal grass material on there? Very nice.
That's grass. Yeah, I'm a bit of a
starter project.
Yeah. So aside from getting to make your own trees like it's kindergarten, you can also experiment with different like ways to approach level generation. And so the first thing I did was like, what is it like if you're just generating rows of tiles and you can just kind of flip a coin and turn them on and off? And in this case, it's really more of a dice roll because it's like a fractional percentage. But like, basically, this is like a generator that just either renders a tile or it doesn't, or it puts an obstacle on it, and sometimes it puts these little eggs out. And frankly, like, the first thing I noticed was like these levels aren't awful. Like after playing the game enough, you kind of know like what might be fun, and like just turning things on and off was kind of cool, but there's still some huge problems. So I'll see if I can find an example. You can get to a point very quickly where you hit like a spot where you can't go any further, right? Like this is all just completely random. Like you're gonna hit here and there's like, pretend that's gone, and like now you're stuck, right?
Yeah.
So first thing, well, not the first thing I did. The first thing I did was I went out and I did a lot of research. So I bought this book, Procedural Generation and Game Design. Highly recommend. Even though I didn't do anything in it specifically, it's just a really good resource for methodology. And it dawned on me like, oh, we should have like a critical path that you can follow through this level, right? So like you're always guaranteed to be able to move forward. And so that's like the next iteration that I wrote. in this little tool. I should just type this here, and then I'll find it easier. Okay. So now you can see there's these like paths laid out, and those are unbroken in this visualization. Obviously, that like cuts down on like some of the foliage and stuff, and we'll get to that in a second. But basically, we're defining these loops. I went with loops rather than just straight lines because in a good Dodo Peak level, there's usually more than one way out of a situation. There are very few dead ends. So by using like loops rather than just like a wiggly line to define this like critical path, I think is probably the only like actually interesting smart thing I did in all of this. Because it guarantees you always have like options, and that's what most games, that's what you want. So you can imagine like sort of following this up. But these levels are still pretty boring, if I would say so. So we wanted to, after playing this, it's cool and you can drop random things in, but we really wanted some like pre-made elements, like stuff that Patrick and I could go and define. And the way we decided to do that was defining this like grammar of, this is just a really ugly data table. I wish I could zoom in on this, but I don't think you can actually do that. It's basically we have text definitions of like groups of blocks, and we need to put those in the level.
By the way, data tables are really cool, and I didn't know that they existed until Kyle showed me. And Unreal.
Yeah, no, data tables are great. It's you can export this as like a CSV file, which is really nice.
Upload it to Google Docs.
Yeah, you literally we've done that for things that aren't this. It's very nice. So we have this like grammar, and this is just for this demo project. The real one's much more intense than that. But basically, you define these like groups of tiles, and then those get put into the level. And I'll show you how that looks really quickly. Then I'll explain what it does, and then I'll show you it working in the main game. So let me edit this, plug this into like the new one, and you can see now when I generate a level, it has these like groups in it. So we see this one here. These numbers are just there to like identify what's part of a group and what isn't. So this one has like a hole in it. This is like the one with the hole in it. And this one is like a bridge with an egg on it. And it just kind of throws these in. The process of figuring out how to actually put these in the level was I'd say not trivial. There's kind of like a problem with something that is endlessly growing upward and you want to like put random pieces inside of it. My first thought was like, we'll have this sort of canvas and we'll move in big sections and we'll just like pick random parts and put random groups in there. And that works to a degree. It didn't let us like stack things as tightly as we wanted. So like ideally, if we wanted, it would have been cool to have the entire level made from these like hundreds of different like pre-made sections, right? So what we really wanted was some sort of like tightly packed thing, but also something that wasn't gonna like take a bunch of random guesses and find things that don't work, because that's bad for like streaming in new layers of the level. Like we want something that's pretty deterministic. And so I was thinking about like what is a good way to pack like different sized objects upwards sort of indefinitely. And I realized this is actually something people have been doing for a long time. It's called building a wall. So these are pictures of what was commonly referred to as like Cyclopean architecture. It's basically
kind of like Legos, right?
I mean, yeah, it's a little bit like Legos. It's a little bit like Tetris, but like if you have to build a wall and you have a bunch of different sized rocks, this is essentially what every person just knows deep inside themselves they have to do. Is you put down like a big rock and you put small rocks like next to it and you put another big rock, and like you do this from the bottom up and you just sort of go layer by layer. And so we devised like a fairly simple algorithm to do this that I have a very silly animation for. So the way it works is you start on an empty row, you put down, you find like the longest like empty section, and you put just a random group in there that fits. Then now we have this section to the right of that. You put something in there that fits. It's taller, but we're still just concerned with this bottom row. until we fill the next biggest section, and then we like fill this small little gap. We move up to the next row, we fill that. We move up to the next row, we have like this 3 section here, so we put something in there that fits. In this case, it would happen to be like a 3 wide, but it doesn't have to be that wide. And then we like continue filling the rest of the row. We move on to the next row, we put something in that slot, put something on there, put something over there, move up, and then start filling that row, and you get it. I'm not going to animate the whole thing. But basically, all of these rectangles are like different pre-made groups, and these gray ones are just sort of like one by one, just random like tiles that aren't like predefined. And so you end up with something that looks like this. And the benefit of it is it runs really quickly. It's sort of like a greedy algorithm for doing this, and it goes on. You can do this on forever, which is what we wanted. We didn't want something that had to like backtrack. So
Clever, though.
to wrap this up, as I was playing endless mode earlier. And this is what it does. There's actually a handy debug mode for this because, believe it or not, designing procedural generation, things break constantly. So you need really good tools. So if you go to the level generator and turn on display debug visuals, you can see pretty much everything I was just talking about. So you can like visualize these, like you see these like rectangles, those are like the critical path. And then on every block it says like the name of the group it's a part of. So this is called like diag tree. At some point you're just naming like weird collections of blocks, so it gets kind of silly. This is a spaced tree. This is meh 0. 2 by 2 empty. So you can see like all of these different groups are getting stacked on top of each other. And if you want to make a tile-based endless runner, I think this is like a decent way to approach it. And that's kind of all I have planned to say on that.
That's great. I do have a question. What is your high score?
Please.
Oh, wow.
It's not that high. It's like 200, which
I'm
people,
going on the
people that aren't
leaderboards.
us.
I'm going to look.
You could look. It's really cool to make a thing that people are better than you at. Like, that's one of the real charming things in game development, I think.
But I do think breaking down, I think your grid and approach to solving the problem is something sometimes we forget, that it's like these problems exist in the real world in various ways. And so sometimes stepping back from your code or trying to think of that and just like, how would I solve this problem,
Totally.
in a real life experience, or what does it translate to? And that can help you come up with a very thoughtful approach to then how it's like, okay, now that I have an idea of how I want it to like actually function, you can then think about how to program it and put it into like blueprints or C++ to
break it into smaller pieces, and
yeah.
It's always
My one
helpful.
regret is I didn't get like a pack of Legos to do this.
You really
I had
should
some
have.
in my like Amazon cart, and then it was like, I don't know if I want to be responsible for 1,000 Legos.
You'll step on them later. It'll be bad.
So my high score is 226, and
Okay.
Patrick's
What is
high
mine?
score is 109. So get on my level.
Okay, I'm going to be playing after this is over.
Awesome. Yeah. So, was there anything else you wanted to share about Dodo Peak?
No, I think.
No, I
that's-
think that's all the
that's
prepared
it.
stuff.
Cool. So, I feel like it makes sense to move on to your latest project. It's the
Yes.
Robot Friendship. So, you want to tell us a little more about? I guess you have the trailer, right?
Yeah,
Should we
let's
start?
play the
Yeah,
let's play
maybe
the teaser.
we can,
yeah,
maybe we can start off playing the teaser. That'd be cool.
We had maybe another. Yeah, there we go. Beautiful.
Cool.
It was awesome. I
So
love
thank you
seeing
so
the
much.
life emerge from it. It's so pretty.
Oh, I'm going to be going into that in a
Thank
little
you.
bit.
Oh man.
Um, but yeah, so yeah, Shoulders of Giants is our current and new project. When we were wrapping up Dota Peak, as a very small studio, we were like, okay, do we want to be like safer and do something similar in scope to what we've done before? Or do we want to be crazy and do something a little crazier? So we opted to be crazy. And
As
we started making something that's a little bigger in scope, well, a lot bigger in scope than Dota Peak. And yeah, what kind of like to give you a little like kind of context into like how we decided to make this project other than the scope, was we were really like interested in making a game that had like a big character and a small character, and just like that juxtaposition and scale, like that's just kind of what started us on this path. But yeah, as Amanda was saying, Shoulders of Giants is an action roguelike where you simultaneously control a sharpshooting space frog perched atop of a sword-wielding robot, and you scavenge the universe for an arsenal of randomized abilities, and you use them to spread light and life back to dark worlds. And I always like to kind of see. I'm always interested, like when I see other games, like, okay, what did you like? How did you start off on your like development journey? Like, what changed? So we actually have a video kind of showing like the evolution of Shoulders of Giants over the course of development so far. And if we could just play that.
Beautiful. So
Awesome. Beautiful. Yeah.
this game was a lot of things, right? Like
it changed a lot. Yeah.
It started as kind of like a walking simulator, weirdly enough. Like, I personally am extremely into Death Stranding. That's not what this is now, but it kind of started as like the idea of like you're moving through this big landscape and you have to direct this like dumb giant around. And it kind of then turned into a real-time strategy game, and then just became a like exploration 3D like character action situation that you see.
Yeah,
now.
like we always like tried to make sure to like play test as much as we can, and just based on play testing, we just kind of moved in the direction that it is currently. So yeah, like I was saying, like one of the biggest like thematic aspects of the game is like this idea of bringing back like light, and life to a world, and we had to figure out like what does that look like? How is that going to work? And not only did we want that like kind of effect to happen like for thematic and story reasons in the game, but we also wanted the majority of like the characters' abilities and weapons to also spread light and life too. So we explored a couple different techniques, and if we transfer to my screen, I can kind of show you guys what we ended up doing. So this is just kind of like one of the first levels in the game, and I love sliders, so I'm just going to slide this here, and you'll see this effect start to happen. So as you can see, it's stealing at me. Okay. So not only is there like a color change, but as you can see, there's like other like types of foliage, and like there's like leaves on trees, and there's this like kind of like bleeding edge of this like glowing like life kind of like coming back to this planet. So if I kind of like zoom into the ground, I can see it a little more clearly. There's also a little bit of like world position offset happening as like things kind of like scale up. Like flowers and different plants. And also, there's things like, like God rays come into view, and different, a bunch of materials are going to change like the way they look. And also, if I play the game, I'm going to go over to a safe spot where no one can kill me. So if I give myself an ability, like a light grenade, I go over to these guys, I fire it at them. So this ability is also going to spread light too, and you'll see that they actually take damage like when they're in the light area too. So if I fire it at a place where I know there's more pretty looking stuff, like here, it's basically the same effect that happens.
That is
so
absolutely lovely.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's actually a very, very simple technique. And the way that it works is, as you can see, I have like a material collection here. So this material collection's got basically, it's got two things, and it's got a lot of those two things. It's got a position in the world, and it's got a radius. So like when I drag the slider, this is basically the world position of this point. And as I drag it, the radius is getting bigger. So if I move this around, you can see like the position of this effect is changing. And so what happens is this material collection, basically we have a material function that reads all of these material collections. So we have a bunch of them because we have like a lot of different abilities and things that use all this stuff. So we basically use a sphere mask, and we take the world position for the material collection, we pump it in there, we pump in the radius, and we basically add all those together. So we have a bunch of them added together. It's pretty big. And then it's basically, you have basically end up with like a mask, black and white mask that's like in world space, which is pretty cool, and you can do a lot of different things with it. So as you can see, there's some kind of like warping and distortion and stuff. So it's not just like a straight line, because that wouldn't be like as visually interesting. So to do that, we basically take, where am I here? There we go. We take all those sphere masks added together, and we basically run it through like a texture, and we use like a height lerp node, which if you've never used before is really cool. Basically, like anything that's between 0 and 1, you can have like use a texture to define like the transition of it, so it's not just flat, and you can make it a lot more interesting. So we run it through there, and then basically a given material will just have that material function, and then we use that to like lerp between colors and opacity, and in some instances like world position offset. And then to get this like bleeding edge here, as I call it, we basically just take that, I call it the light dark function, which is basically all the sphere masks added together, and then we just like apply like a negative contrast, and that what that does is kind of like sucks everything up, so you basically just get this kind of like bleeding edge around everything. And then we add, some emissive color to that, and then whatever material we want to have to that effect, we just add that to the emissive channel of that material, and that's basically how the visual system works. And then there's an actor in the world that it spawned that kind of handles like the writing of the information to the material collection. So like the radius, as I was talking about, we also have like a sphere collision that will scale up its radius as well, so like actors will know if they're inside or outside of the light area. Yeah.
You just make it sound like it's so easy. Just.
Yes. Well, unfortunately,
I will say this. I didn't come to this like I think like the best solution to everything is like always the simplest one, but I didn't like, it's not like I just like settled on this like in the beginning. Like I actually in the beginning I was using render targets like a couple different methods, and so it took me a while to like ended up setting on this, and then like it was like pretty unorganized. I was like, oh, I'm gonna organize it into material functions, and so it's not like I just sat down and made this in like an hour. But
easily months of like R&D. I mean, not solid months, but like this took so long.
It took a while to like figure out exactly. I mean, just from like a creative perspective too, like how we wanted it to look, and then it's like how we wanted it to work. But Amanda, did anybody have questions on that technique?
They're actually wondering how expensive is it? Does it take a lot of?
It's a very good question. So it we're like our platform plans right now are like console and PC. So we're targeting like kind of, not super low tier hardware, but actually it runs even like great on phones. So it does, there is a cost for sure. I think it's like 150 like shader instructions basically added to everything, but I can show you guys the shader complexity. Let's see. So it's, it's greenish brown. So which is not terrible. The red is like basically the transparency, like the God rays. So, and the interesting thing too is like, and I am not like a super expert in terms of like how efficient like all of this, like the GPU cost of these things. But if I do slide this on in the shader graph, I don't see anything in the shader complexity until these objects are on. So it does get a little red, like when the effect is like fully like in place.
Right.
But we're, you know, like on a lower end PC, you know, we're getting like 60 FPS, and we don't. I think
Yeah.
there's actually like this is not a bottleneck. There's like things that are a much better
Yeah.
bottleneck. So like you should
Weirdly,
go ahead.
the
Sorry.
bottleneck with this that we found was actually CPU, just from having the sphere collision. So like,
Yeah, that's true.
we did
Actually,
have
yeah. Once you have
where
like
it's like, you get a sphere that goes up to the size of the whole level, which is like how levels end, is like
right.
everything.
Mhm.
That'll lag pretty good if you're constantly changing
If you
the
have a
size
huge
of a sphere.
like overlap that has to
Um,
check like everything, that's like that was the bottleneck for us. So
Yes.
we basically kind of cheated it from just like instead of like scaling up over time, it just goes from 0 to 1 like over one frame, and that
Mm.
no one really seems to notice that that is happening.
Oh,
and that
that's only.
fixed
I
the
will say
problem.
to my credit, it's only on the end of level one. But yeah, fixed it completely. Yeah, it's not the GPU. Weirdly, I'm also really impressed by that.
Yeah, I was like a little bit scared, but after testing, it was actually not too bad.
That's great. Let's see. As far as the questions specific to that effect, at least there weren't many more.
Cool. I can move on to my next thing, or unless we want to do some. Okay, cool. So the other cool thing that we did was, let me just open up another level here. So our levels aren't like procedurally generated, but there are a lot of like randomized elements, and one of like the visual randomized elements that we wanted to have was we wanted to have randomized colors. So we don't actually have like every color is like randomized, because I don't think that would be like very visually appealing. So what we ended up doing is we have just like basically color palettes, like predefined color palettes. So if I click on this actor in this level, kind of like it'll basically swap between the different color palettes that I have like assigned as options in this level.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing too is like this is basically a material collection with there's a lot of different like color options in here. So like basically every one of these like corresponds to like a certain like prop or like color that we want to have in the level. But I could like, you know, as we further develop the game, like our library of color palettes is going to really grow, and I can like reuse them like all over the place, because all of our materials are set up to use that like light transition, to use the random color effects, and it also like, you know, not only does it like affect the materials like of like static meshes, but also like the skybox and the fog color and like all that stuff. So like the goal is to have it like the level to feel like pretty different. And the way that it works at runtime is we just have this like actor that basically you tell it like, okay, I want to have, these are the possible color sets that I want to be able to use. And then at runtime, we have like basically a hero material collection that all the materials are referencing to get their color information from. And then at runtime, we'll basically pick from one of those possible sets. And then this is basically like an array of strings that is just the same list of the material collection. And it will just take the colors from the template and then push them into the hero color collection at runtime. And it also works very quickly and fast. So there's probably a lot of different methods of like doing this type of technique, but this is the one that made sense for us. And one of the other like cool things that a cool tool that Kyle made actually was like, as I'm like making these like, you know, color palettes in game, one of the problems that I had was you know, you can't like, I basically have a hero material collection that all the materials are referencing, but let's say I want to like go back to a material set that I previously made and I want to update it or change it or further like looked at it or use it as like a template for like viewing something else. As you can see here, where did my color sets go? Oh, here we go. So I have, like, for example, in this, I have like 3 color sets. I have these 3. So like, let's say that this one here, I wanted to like tweak. I want to tweak the rock. So if I double click it, I open it up. Oh, Siri said something.
That was so
Scared
scary.
me for a second. The iMac
Thought there was
behind me.
just someone in that
was
room
like
with you.
terrifying. Oh my god. Okay, so if I wanted to change this rock color, it like you won't see it update because it's all the materials are referencing not this material collection, they're referencing another one, like the hero one. So I could click this button, which will then just like eventually like will pick the color set that I want and it will update. Right, but if I want to do this in real time, like how can we do that? So Kyle actually made an editor function, which so if I click this, preview editor set 0,
Sorry, Pat,
so then in real.
Can you scroll down a bit? Your face is in front of your
Oh no!
doodad.
Okay. Yeah. Let me.
Oh,
There you go.
we just
Oh,
did it.
it's faded out. Faded out. This is beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So if I click this preview color set 0, this will actually execute on tick only in editor that same function that will update the materials. Or the material collection. So like then I can make like a beautiful pink rock, or like I want to make a fully green rock, and it updates in real time. And that way it's like very easy to like iterate. And Kyle, I don't know if you want to just like, there's actually a really cool tool for like editor stuff. I don't know if you want to talk about it a bit more, Kyle. I can kind of show it on my screen here.
Yeah, if you just stick on your screen. So this is, I'm not going to take like really credit for this. This is like completely based on a YouTube tutorial. If you want to look it up, it's editor tick tutorial using Blueprint by someone named Sili, S-I-L-I. But basically what it does is it creates an editor utility blueprint that is outside of this like color setter blueprint that runs in game. And if you go to the construction script, if you have that checkbox that he mentioned checked, it'll create this child actor, and that actor has its own sort of like timer that it runs off, and every I think like 1/10 of a second, it calls an interface function on the color setter blueprint, which is just called editor tick. And yeah, that'll just run it, and it just does what it would do in game, just copies all the colors over. And you can kind of use this as a way to, if you want like an external object's settings to be reflected in a in-game object, or like an editor object like this. So normally you could just use your construction script to like automatically reflect variable changes in properties like in the editor, but because this is an external object, having a tick like that just constantly updating while that checkbox is on is a great way to work around that for prototyping.
And we can give a huge shout out to Sili because they're in chat and hanging out. And
hell yeah.
Great work.
Nice.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man.
I
You
thought it
saved
was
us a lot of
amazing.
time.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to give you, I realized
awesome.
I didn't give the video a thumbs up, so giving it a thumbs up, and everyone check it out, and it's super useful. Thank you so much for doing that. I spent weirdly long trying to figure out, there's 100 different ways to kind of do that, but like just having the editor tick was like so much easier and simpler.
Well, and I think that's what's great, right, about having a community. And it's like, yeah, maybe somebody else has figured out something, and you can just leverage that knowledge from someone else's experience
totally.
and take it and, utilize it where it makes sense. And then, if you're going in and you're sharing today how you worked on your effects, and hopefully somebody else can be like, oh yeah, thanks to Kyle and Patrick, now I know how to do this cool thing.
Yeah.
So that's really fun.
I guess you could say
great.
that in a way, Kyle was standing on the shoulders of giants with the knowledge.
How do I leave this call? That's awesome, though. That's what a charmed life.
Yeah, no, that's very cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Love it.
Cool. So I did have one more sort of like tech art thing that I wanted to show. So going with like the theme that obviously I think a lot of indie devs experience is having a really small team. You wear a lot of different hats. So not only do I do the environment art, but I do most of the level design, at least thus far. So I think like, I don't think it's like an official term, but I think a pretty common term in like designing levels is like gray boxing. So, using gray boxes to lay out your level, which is something that I do. So I thought, okay, well, would it be like, what if we like not only laid out the level in boxes, but we actually took those boxes and we did something to them to actually make them look good and actually not have to like then model a landscape and just be able to like use them as like pretty landscape art in game. So I'm going to show you guys how I did that. So this is like the level mesh landscape that I'm just going to turn off. I'm going to turn on my level prototype, which is basically a bunch of boxes. Oh wait, why is it not on?
Oh no, is the
Oh
root-
no. Why are my boxes not turning on? Whoa. No. Let's see. There's got to be some reason. It's always fun to troubleshoot. Okay.
Well, this is a good chance if you're trying to figure it out too. Like when things like this happen to you, right? What is your approach to
You
figuring
know,
it out?
yeah, it's good. It's like, okay, so this, it says the visibility's on, but it's not because I don't see it. You know what I'm gonna do in this? I have another level that I can open.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest like, hey, let's go to the
Let's
other
open
turkey
the other
that's already been
level.
cooked.
They're suggesting press G.
Oh yeah, G's a good one. Let's see. These cubes. Their visibility. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is the actual level that I laid out just using cubes. You know, as you can see, it's not as pretty as what I just had. So what I did was, I'm a big Houdini user, so I actually utilized the Houdini engine plugin for Unreal, and I basically have an HDA file, Houdini digital asset, that I basically tell it, okay, take all these pieces of cubes or whatever type of static mesh I want, and then run it through these like series of operations. So to show that a little more interactively, I'm going to open up another level. But before I do that, again, this is the end result of taking all those boxes, and I didn't end up, you know, modeling anything else. I obviously added in a lot of props and stuff, but the actual like landscape, this is what you end up with. But to demo the actual tool, so this is a very simple level with just like a couple boxes. But like, let's say, you know, I'm like, okay, this is a cool level. You know, maybe I like land here and go up or whatever. I click on this HDA file. Basically, the way it works is I define a bunch of. I just basically add in all the static meshes I want, and it basically will Boolean them all together. It will remesh them appropriately, and then add in like a couple different types of procedural noise and do some like bevels. And it will also add in some vertex color based on like the normal slope to get like the nice color stuff that I want for some of my masks I have going on. So like, for example, if I like move this box out, oh, it has to turn on the plugin. Just a second. Normally you don't have to do this part, but I forgot to turn it on. Okay, it's actually pretty quick. So okay, so now you see, okay, it updated. And these blocks, this is ugly right now, but you can imagine if you actually like laid out a level and massaged it a bit, you could like, you know, you could get something that's actually usable, and you wouldn't have to like rely on another person or yourself to do another step to make the landscape look good. If I click play, I got all my collisions, and yeah, it's a pretty simple tool, but it's pretty powerful, and we're definitely using it quite a bit.
Yeah, that's great.
It's pretty. Frankly, it's amazing. I had nothing to do with that, so I think it's. I was begging Patrick for a long time to like make it just do this.
Yeah.
And then one day he just showed up at work. He's like, "Hey, look at that."
Yeah, I feel like that makes iteration and change, and it's like, oh, if the level doesn't feel quite right, like you can make these quick adjustments that aren't like hours of work or you know.
Totally.
100%.
Yeah, anything to save you time, and like, you know, there could be certain circumstances where we might do something like a custom like mesh or landscape or whatever, but you know, for the look of our game and we have going on, this like seems to really work for us for the most part. So yeah,
That's great. Anything else you want to show off?
I think we're good
Kyle,
on
did you
like
wanna show
demo
anything off?
stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have anything like that interesting to look at. So I think that's like a good place to sort of cut to questions. I will say like our game, just for reference, like Shoulders of Giants, part of it is like we deal with like multiplayer and we use the game playability system. If people have specific questions about that in chat, I can talk about it. But like I don't have a demo, so I'm not going to just like bucket off time to be like, look, more blueprint nodes. But yeah, any questions about what Patrick just talked about, or the game, or kind of anything at this point, I think we're open to.
Yeah.
All right,
totally.
so it's open season on questions, but they were wondering, okay, going back to the materials that you were working on, are you using instancing with those materials, or how are you handling those?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. There's like certain subsets of things, like, for example, like this like landscape. There's like an instance that I've made that I'll like reuse for all the landscapes, or like a rock. You know, there might be some different properties that I want. So yes, I'm definitely using instancing, like when appropriate, and kind of like, you know, different foliage I'm using like the same like base material class for, and that's definitely a very, very handy thing to do, and yeah.
Okay. Mitch was wondering regarding the Houdini pipeline. Does the HDA assign the materials based off the vertex color through a string path to Unreal? That is a very specific question.
So there's one. No, it doesn't do that. I'm familiar with like what you're talking about. But for my purposes, I would actually just use one material, and inside of that material, I'm just using the vertex color as a lerp between like different colors or textures that I have.
Gotcha.
Ooh, I think I understood that. That's smart. I like that.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think this was related to Dodo Peak, but I think it could also be applicable to Shoulders of Giants. And it's like, how do you go about determining like who your audience is?
That's like a very
boy.
good question. That's very
that's another
you know,
one of those where if I knew the answer, you'd be on my live stream. Like
to be honest,
that's a huge
one thing that like is really helpful is like, I mean, you have an idea for who your audience is, but generally like, I'm not an expert on this, but we try our earnest because we have to. But like actually seeing like people play at like events, you know, like obviously right now it's hard to do, but we did actually do an in-person event in August, and we actually for the first time got like real strangers to play our game, and I think from that, you know, you can really learn a lot about who really likes your game and who's not liking it as much. And for me personally, I think that is like a very, very valuable tool to do, to figure that out with.
Yeah.
Well, I think that leads a little into play testing too. Like, how do you go about finding play testers? Is it always asking, you know, because we encounter this even with game jam games, right? Like, if you play your own game, sometimes the difficulty is not quite adjusted to what other players can experience or are capable of, or that learning curve is steep. So do you know, is it mostly friends and family? Do you connect with circles? Obviously, in the world of conferences, you could take a booth and have people play it there. But in lieu of that, what do you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think, you know, for us, we obviously have game developer friends, and like it's cool to have that feedback. But like, I find that like people that are non-game developers are generally, their feedback is, I think, more relevant normally. So of course, like we have, you know, our immediate go-to is like friends and family. We haven't, aside from like events, we haven't done a lot of like, you know, just like getting strangers to play the game. That's probably something we're going to try to do more in the future, like outside of events. But I don't know, Kyle, what else do you think about that?
Yeah, I think one of the realities of being a team of, you know, like the core of our company is 2 people, and then like there's other people who are really involved in the project. But we're so small, like we don't have a huge network of playtesters to bring in that we don't know outside of events. So yeah, like friends and family are great. People at game development events are great, but like Patrick said, you can get feedback that's a little too like, this is how I would make the game, which can also be very useful if it's like someone who's really good at game development. But like, yeah, just friends and family. Unfortunately, we'd love to ask that question to someone too and get an answer of like how to find people who you don't know who will play your game in a secure and reasonably priced way.
I think there's one other small thing that I can add, and that's that like I think there's two different types of like playtesters too. It's like the person that's never played the game before, so that's like super fresh, and that's like very valuable because like you know, obviously your player's first experience is like the most important part. But then it's also interesting to get like we have a couple people who like play the game like throughout development, and like they have a unique perspective too. And I think trying to get like kind of both of those sets of perspective is important if you can.
No, totally. I mean, the new players are the ones that'll teach, right? There's that sort of tutorial or the onboarding experience at the front of the game. And if you have folks that have played it, like they kind of know what to expect or they know how to get in, even if you make some changes, you'll see sort of their shift. That's still not the same as like a brand new, somebody that's never played
fresh set of eyes, for sure.
Experience. Again, I think this does go back to Dodo Peak, but could apply to both. But so Rarebird Games was asking, what was the one thing, and it could, there's probably many, that you found helped you optimize like your frame rate and that?
That's a great question.
We probably both have maybe similar, but like I will say from my perspective, like the first thing that I always try to do is like figure out if it's GPU bound or CPU bound. So I do like the stat unit command, and most of the, like if it's CPU bound, then I talk to Kyle because he is more involved in that stuff than I am. And so far on our project, like, well, so we did initially do some builds, like we wanted to see like, you know, how it ran on like mobile devices, and that in that sense it was actually GPU bound, so we had to like go in there and like kind of just like one by one, okay, well what, just turn things off, you know what I mean, like turn different features off, turn the post-processing off, turn off shadows, like get more aggressive with your LODs and like see, you know, I think there are like some GPU debugging tools and like, you know, like Xcode and stuff, but like just that kind of basic thing, like just like turning different things off and seeing how it affects their frame rate is really important. And then obviously if it's CPU bound, Kyle, what do you use for that?
So in terms of tooling, the profiler is your best friend, right? It's like developer tools. Oh my god, I just forgot everything I ever knew. Session front end.
Yes.
And I'll see. I have that up on my screen. I don't think it'll actually anything useful will happen there, but.
Do you want to talk about the enemy health bars as like a?
Yeah. So I was going to get to in terms of my editor froze and my brain froze at the same time. So the main thing is like make good friends with like the profiler in Unreal, and I am not super qualified to give a good tutorial on that on the spot, but basically you can record things in a development build of the game or also just in editor, which you generally shouldn't do, but in our case we've actually had almost all of our performance issues with Shoulders of Giants have been like the editor being weird.
Yeah,
we,
like the
build
build
it out
is
and everything's fine.
Yeah.
So in that case, profiling the editor is actually kind of okay. You just need to look for the game thread. But this is all a long way of saying the issue is almost always Slate. It's pretty much always something with like Slate, unfortunately.
Well, it's like something that you normally like wouldn't like. You know, for example, I know someone asked like, "Oh, is the like the light dark transition effect? How expensive is that?" It's like, well, I would think that it would be, but in reality, it really wasn't. But what was bottlenecking us was like we have these like 3D widgets over the top of the enemies.
Yeah.
And actually, that was like really slowing the game down like a crazy amount. So like, it's not always what you think it is. So that's why like profiling, you know, is really important to tell you exactly.
If we cut to my screen, this is the most expensive part of Dodo Peak is the main menu, right? It's literally just all of these main menu widgets that all, I believe, tick because that's how we wrote it. It should all probably be event driven, and that would have helped a lot. But just having all of these widgets, like that was crazy. Like the game would run 60 on everything.
Like widgets that are not very performant, like very easily, and so you definitely have to be careful with that.
And if this is how you learn to program, you're going to do it that way. So that was it. I ended up writing like a really hacky thing because time was so of the essence that it basically just like turned the tick off for things that were off screen. But anyway, same thing in Shoulders of Giants. Enemy health bars were what was like slowing down the game. Like it was CPU bound because we were re-rendering the health bars of all the enemies every tick. And
updating all their information.
Yeah. Still haven't fixed it to be event driven. I just made it so it runs off a timer and just does it like every second or something as a workaround for now. But slate tick will kill you, is my weird big answer to that question. It was never pathfinding. Sometimes AI in Shoulders of Giants can be a little bit expensive, but like it's so far always been slate ticking.
They say tick will get you, so.
Yep. Yes.
Oh yeah.
It's definitely a much safer way to go. Well, kind of speaking out to some of that, you're talking about learning. Where did you all kind of take your approach to learning Unreal Engine, and where have you found some of your best resources? And then, at what point, following up on that, at what point do you decide that it's actually more valuable to like bring on somebody else that maybe has experience there versus buckling down and figuring out that system for yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah, wow.
I think for me, like, I didn't have like there's one part of like game development which is like art, which I had a big background in, but the other like component like programming, like I didn't really have any experience. So I felt like in order for me to like learn Unreal, I wanted to get better at the part that I wasn't good at. I'm still not nearly as good at it as someone like Kyle, but like I can at least like understand it and do some of it now. But when I was learning Unreal, frankly I just like watched a lot of your guys' like YouTube videos and just like some like general like YouTube like programming information. But then to answer the second part of that question is like, which I think is really important, which is like, when do you identify like bringing someone else on or like collaborating? I think different people work in different ways. I really like working with other people, and I feel like it's good to know your strengths and weaknesses. So like I was saying, like I'm better at the art aspect, but like not the programming aspect. So if you can find someone that can help with the part that you're not as good at or that you don't like doing as much, that's the other important thing. If you're really not good at something but you really like learning it, like that's cool too, and like that's incentive to try to get better at it. But if there's a part you don't enjoy and you also feel like you're not good at, then that could be an important opportunity to try to find someone that could help you.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'd echo basically all of that.
Perfect. Oh, good, you're in alignment. What, kind of based on the idea of like things that you like and you don't, like how do you stay motivated? Like, it can be a long process, right? Making a game, and there's a lot of challenges and hurdles to overcome in development. So, how do you stay creative? How do you stay motivated throughout the process and keep at it?
I can speak for myself.
Yeah.
I think there's so many different ways to answer this question. The first thing that comes to mind, because it's been a pretty tough month for us just in terms of like, things move in fits and starts. And like also just like working, trying to get like alpha together pretty soon, and also putting together stuff for this awesome opportunity to talk to you on this stream, Amanda. But all this is to say, you can get tired doing this, and I think it's important to take breaks if you have that luxury. I realize not everyone is in a job where that's always an option, but boy, will you can resent the coolest thing in the world if you overwork yourself on it.
Yeah.
So like,
that's definitely true.
I just definitely want to open saying that. I think it's also important to, if some problem is giving you like so much trouble, like if there's a project you're working on or a small task that you just can't get done, like put it down, do something else. I try personally to get like one notable thing done every day, and then after like a year, that's like 300 significant things you've done, and that's a game. So
yeah,
if I've lost a whole day on debugging something and that feels awful, and rather than spending the next day, I might just move on to something else.
Yeah, I think like it's good to like have that, like I think what helps me too is like Kyle said, like you definitely don't want to overwork yourself, but if you can set like little goals and like once you accomplish something that you wanted to accomplish, like that can feel really good and that can help like motivate you to get to the next thing. And it's also good to like break them up into like, you know, it's like, oh, I want to finish the game, but that's like the finish line. This is a marathon. You got to like think of like, okay, I want to get it to run, you know, like on my computer like without crashing, or you know, or like, you know, I just want to get a build that I can share to a friend, or something small like that that you can accomplish like in a day or two. You know, I think goes a long way into keeping you like motivated for the long haul.
I think those are great tips. So it's fantastic advice. So yeah, for the folks that are working on projects, find ways to take breaks. Find ways to, you know, if there's a part of your project that's not exciting or not encouraging at the moment, you know, find something to reignite that spark and then come back and face that. So Mr. John 10.L Web is wondering, how large is your game dev team at this point?
So there's right now there's 4 of us on Shoulders of Giants, and we're adding a 5th person to the team shortly.
Massive growth.
It's like a 25% increase, I believe.
It's true. So we're gonna like have to like
scaling.
that's gonna be big for us. So we're gonna have to figure that out. Gonna have to do some more production management for sure.
Yeah, and that's like 100% true. Weirdly enough, you know, when it's 2 people again, you can just bounce ideas. 2 people, you can kind of manage the same as one people. You know, you can just kind of bounce ideas and have sort of a group mind. But once you have a remote team with 5 people, you know, we're going to be upping like doing check-ins and things like that. But so yeah, it's 5 people core, and then we also have some like contractors we know who have helped with like specific things here and there.
Gotcha. Let's see. Andrej was wondering if you have ever found that you're able to C++ your way out of a bottleneck where something was Blueprint instead. So have you felt that's like you're kind of hitting a wall with something in Blueprints and then moving over to C++ actually helped you solve or accomplish what you were looking to do?
That's, I think, so kind of. This, again, speaks to, like, for better or worse, the stuff we work on has been fairly simplistic in terms of, like, what the gameplay is. We're not running any, like, we're not simulating an economy. We're not running, like, some sort of, like, Nemesis system. We're just, you know, you go to the place.
There's not like a crazy
AI,
amount of dependencies or anything, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Dodo Peak's, like, gameplay loop is, you know, it's sort of the amount of features of like an 80s arcade game. It just looks really, really, really nice.
I will say, from my perspective, like I was saying in like the earlier part of the talk, like I started blueprinting the enemies in Dodo Peak, and then I eventually rewrote them in code, and that process actually helped me a lot. I think, I don't know if it was like as much just like rewriting it in code, but it was like kind of an opportunity to like totally refactor like the whole thing, and that I think helped the process quite a bit.
Yeah, and I will say, like, this is kind of doing offloading C++, so just like make use of the nav mesh if you can. Like if you have a game with pathfinding, like instead, if there's different ways that someone might hack together to like find a random spot to spawn something, and there's just hooks that are like find a random spot on the nav mesh within a radius. Like there's Blueprint nodes that do that. And those are obviously calling out to C++, and it's way faster than like shooting out a bunch of like random line traces to figure out where to go, like, which is something I did before realizing there's a better way to do it. So stuff like that. Make use of the systems in Unreal, like, that are already there for you.
No, absolutely. Red33 is wondering how you handled the music for the games.
Ooh.
It's a good question. So for the first game, we have a good friend of mine, Nathan McKee, who's the composer, who I actually played in a band with, and he did the music for my other collaborator, James's first app. So that was like pretty easy pick. We're actually still figuring out our music plans for Shoulders of Giants, so we will keep you all posted on that.
All right. Well, I guess we'll stay tuned at Shoulders of G on Twitter to keep an eye on it. They're wondering, since, with remote teams, how do you allow people to work? What was your process like working together remotely, sharing different project pieces and, concurrent development and all that?
Yeah, you want to take that one, Kyle?
There's so many angles to this. So when we were starting, so Shoulders of Giants has been in development in one way or another basically since exactly when the pandemic started.
Okay.
We didn't plan it that way, but that was sort of a thing that.
Yeah, we
Patrick
did.
and
We
some other
planned it
people
to
were-
develop a game during the pandemic.
We actually, we had a game and we knew like we should probably have a pandemic, so I got working.
We
on
should
that.
wait until a pandemic. Yeah.
So Patrick was like starting work on like we were doing like a prototyping phase, and we didn't really know like Shoulders of Giants was just one of many ideas that we were working on. And during that time, I was also porting Dodo Peak to the Nintendo Switch, or I shouldn't say porting. It's the same game. I was making it run on the Nintendo Switch, and so that was a bit of a mess because like dev kits are a thing. If you're fully focused on PC, like it's pretty easy, but we also have a studio full of Apple hardware for like quality assurance on Dodo Peak. So luckily we're a small team and we could go into the office if we really needed to.
And luckily when we were doing the Nintendo Switch development, at the time Kyle lived like 2 blocks from me, so it was pretty easy to like actually like physically move the development stuff back and forth.
Yeah, I could just hand it to them, like figure out what values make this look good. I don't like just hand it off. Not everyone has that luxury. There's a lot of remote,
right.
like desktop stuff that happens. It's not easy. I think it's good,
especially like during the beginning of a project. It can like during the brainstorming phase. I think it can present like some unique challenges for sure.
Yeah, like in addition to just daily like stand-ups or check-ins or whatever you want to call them, I think it's really useful. Like Patrick and I both contribute, I'd say, equally to the creative vision of Shoulders of Giants, and like being able to even just open up a call and just talk for an hour, that's so huge. Like just being able to bounce ideas around.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and like. I mean, I think a smaller team, it's easier than like moving like an org structure of like thousands of people to remote. Like again, it's just kind of like calling your buddy. But it's I don't know. I'm like meandering here, but yeah, it's tough. But also, it's not the worst. I don't know.
They're also wondering, kind of digging into that a little bit, like what source control did you?
Oh, right. Yes. Great question. So, Dodo Peak is on Git. That was like, Patrick, I think you set that up, yeah? Like, do you remember how you came to that?
You told me to get out of here. So, Git is really good. So I worked in open source software for a long time, and Git is an amazing tool. It's not, in my opinion, not especially good for Unreal. It doesn't handle large files well. You can make it handle large files well. GitHub is amazing, and that's what I think people really like. But I'll save that like dumb nerd rant. Git is great, but when we started developing Shoulders of Giants on Git, and just the file contention, like people modifying the same files, was just like so much of a thing. Like we ended up moving to Perforce. We host our own Perforce server. And that's been really great for us. The integration is phenomenal. It's beautiful. We love it. So that's how we do things. And like I mentioned before, we're always talking on Slack. We have a Trello for like tracking work. We have a Gantt chart for like tracking schedules. And through some combination of all of those things, the work gets around. Patrick, I know like the way art works is maybe a little different, or like how people get. It's pretty similar. It's kind of like just giving feedback, you know.
Right. A lot of Google Drive.
Yeah, lots of different ways, and so that I think that's the curiosity too, is right. Like, which approach did you find work for you? Obviously, it varies by team, but always having the insight into like what you found useful, other people can kind of take advice.
No, they got to a point where I was offering to get James and Pat like a steak dinner if they learned to use Git on the command line. No one took me up on it, But boy,
Maybe I will
it was.
someday.
I will say, like, having, like, if you learn your tools, that's so much nicer to the programmer who has to come over and like help you. Git is so complicated. Anyway, let's. I don't want to besmirch anyone on this stream, but it's very complicated. I made my living working on Git related stuff for a few years, like continuous integration, but that's a whole nother talk.
Okay. Going back into something a little more inspirational, Thomas Franklin was wondering, like, what? I think this goes back to Dodo Peak, but I think could be an interesting question for both. What were your visual styles like pulled from, or what inspired you to go in the directions that you took on the games?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of different things going on. I mean, I think, from my perspective, like I always, like professionally, I always worked in like photorealism. So I kind of got like bored of making things real, and I wanted to make something that was more stylized. So like kind of the look of both of those games kind of like fall under that, like just me as an artist, like what I'm like interested in making. But then, our art director, Max, I think, we kind of found him because that's like his style. He's got this like beautifully illustrated, like stylized, like kind of modern aesthetic. And, that really comes through in like, he did all the concept art and really defined a lot of the look for both games. So big kudos to him.
Let's see. Were there any beliefs? So Bernardo was wondering, were there any beliefs about game development that you found out like weren't true? So things that you had like general assumptions about going into game development that once you were in it, like, oh, it's not like that at all. Or
so
that's
I will
such a cool
say,
question.
Yeah, I mean, I think like everyone's situation is so different, right? But like I think like the thing that like everyone, like Kyle and I both like had like jobs where we made a living like unrelated to game development, and I think a lot of people will tell you like, oh well, if you want to be an indie developer, it's not possible, or like you can't make a living making games. And like it is definitely hard, but it's definitely possible as well. And I think like Kyle and I really try to like not overwork ourselves too. We try to like maintain like a balance, like work-life balance, and that's something that I think the games industry, if like I think a lot of people will associate like crunch and all that stuff, and I think that's something that if you try to avoid, and you can definitely it's definitely possible. But Kyle, what do you think about that?
I mean, I agree with all of that. I'm trying to think of like a different angle. I don't know. Multiplayer is not a checkbox that you just turn on, despite what Reddit might have you believe.
That's actually a very good one.
Just add multiplayer.
Yeah, it's just
if you want to
so
add
easy.
Multiplayer, don't do it at the end because it won't happen.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend that. I don't know. I feel like I have to think about this question for a whole year. It's what was wrong. I think like you don't have to listen to everyone's feedback is like one thing that
that's true.
I don't know if people say you should, but like people will tell you like all kinds of bad advice, and like people will give you suggestions that are like
they'll also give you really good advice, but it's like if there's a lot of like feedback that's similar, like okay, this is a lot of people are experiencing this, so this is something I should probably look into. But if you have like the off feedback that you only hear one time, like probably don't need to worry about it as much.
Don't let it get inside your head. You don't have to do one thing just because like one person said it. That sounds like I have a grudge. I don't. I am not thinking about anything in particular. It's just like I could definitely rabbit hole on that kind of thing.
Sarah 3D was wondering, have you found it hard to structure social media posts for the game as you're working on it? They feel like they never have enough to show off in development. And I guess on that, like, do you have somebody dedicated, or is it's you two, isn't it?
You're looking at him on with the glasses, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like pretty online. I do a lot of like I won't go into. I'm also like a professional comedy writer outside of games, so like that's like another thing. Like before I was doing this, so I'm very online. I do our posts. We never do them enough. we're also technically
It's hard. It's so hard to make
Yeah.
enough content. Like I'll make a lot of the content, and then Kyle will like show like how like decide how to show it and when to show it, and we'll actually show it. And
Yeah.
also obviously he'll make other stuff too. But it is a lot of work, and it's like it's hard. I think it's definitely could be a challenge to make like meaningful posts.
Yes.
And deciding like when and how often and what type of things it's
Like,
not easy.
Yeah, some things I'll just throw out there. It's like, it's such a weird thing to. Every platform's different, so we mostly stick to Twitter, and that's actually kind of it in terms of social media right now. Twitter and Reddit. Everyone has their own skills. Like some people really love starting a Discord. Some people do a lot on like Imager. But Twitter's where I live, and I'm the person doing it, so that's where we are. There's a lot of game stuff on Twitter. I will say, like, first off, like, and where we are in marketing now, it's like we kind of have only like soft announced the game. Obviously, we're here talking about it, but like we have not done a huge campaign. We haven't announced any platforms. We don't have any like wish lists you can do. Like it's just kind of something we put out there, partly to see if people would be interested in it. And that was a big thing. Like if you had talked to us in February, we wouldn't be sure if we were making Shoulders of Giants. Like it was just like the biggest prototype we had. So in that way, putting it out on social media was great because it showed us like, oh, people want to play this, and also people really like frogs.
That's like an important like tool. I mean, that Kyle, that you said like that. I think you can use is like if you show something too like that, like a bit earlier on, and like do some posts, you can kind of generally see if like people are feeling it, or maybe you want to circle back to the idea or not. That's like another. That's something that we tried to use it for, and I think it was successful in that sense.
Yeah, I'm happy with how it's gone. But yeah, it's a constant struggle. I know everyone's like, oh, you gotta hit up Screenshot Saturday, and like people look at Screenshot Saturday, but like Saturday, it turns out, is actually a terrible day for social media in general. So you're only gonna get the people that look at Screenshot Saturday. It's just like an endless array of things to like get very beaten down by. And my advice that I haven't taken is just be consistent.
Yeah, that is true. That is very important. I think that's one of the things we've talked about doing a whole stream on here is like just sitting down with teams and talking about social strategies.
That would be a great like 2 hours just on that.
Whole side thing. But let's see. So DJ V808 was wondering, as an indie studio, how do you go about recruiting new talent?
That's a good question. Yeah. Well, we like my background, like working as like I was a freelance 3D artist for a really long time, so I do know like a lot. I have a network of like people from like in the art world that we work with. But for the first time, we actually did make our first ever like job post, and we got a lot of people that way. And it's definitely challenging to find the right person. And I think obviously you use your network, but also you always like want to expand your network too. And there's like, there's events, like we've had people that have come up to us during events, so we've actually hired some people that way too. Like we met a really good animator at PAX and worked with him quite a bit. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else to add, Kyle?
No, not really. Specifically, if people are curious, like we had a post on Work with Indies and also just promoted it around our networks on Twitter. It's really hard to find like people in general. I'm sure the person asking the question knows that. I think, I got nothing. Just internal recommendations from people is always, like, in my opinion, the most useful.
If you can get a recommend, that's really good.
I worked in hiring for a long time at like literally like I worked on hiring, like the systems of hiring at a big tech company, and we did a lot of research on like interviews and hiring, and the sad takeaway was like it's really hard to predict how good someone will be based on an interview. So knowing people that other people think are good is very useful, but can also perpetuate all kinds of awful systemic problems. So I don't know. In some, I have no idea. Yeah.
But basically, it's like, it's been good encounters with people at conferences. Sometimes it's listings, going where, I think another way to go is like finding the communities where the people you're trying to hire are, right? Like if you're looking for an animator, going to like the Animation World Network, or, Polycount would be a great place for like 3D artists, or finding the communities that those folks spend their time in, and seeing, can you see some of their work, or can you see if they're looking for jobs or things like that. So
Totally.
2020 Honest Stand Games was wondering, how do you manage versions of the engine? Do you always upgrade to the latest, or settle on a release and sit there for a little while?
That's a great practical question. So for Dodo Peak, we updated pretty regularly, and we're always quick to check like preview builds, because especially the first year of Apple Arcade, there were like some fairly significant changes to just Apple APIs, and the easiest way to get those in is to just upgrade the engine, which is scary. I don't have any advice on upgrading the engine other than like make sure you have a backup. Like if you have version control, that should be like a thing that you can just do. But like, if you don't,
upgrade it,
make sure you have a backup.
build on your platforms. Make sure everything still works.
Yeah. And like you have to, unfortunately, every time you upgrade, you have to do like a full QA of the entire game, because like, oh, now Arabic doesn't work. Like it's just like anything can go wrong after you upgrade the engine. Like any API might have changed. So yeah, we typically, until very recently, we're upgrading Dodo Peak to every single engine that came out, like the second it came out, just out of necessity. Shoulders of Giants, I believe, is still on 4.2.6. Not for any reason, we just haven't done it. We have been pretty lucky with upgrades where like things haven't gotten too crazy, but we'll upgrade it at some point.
Cool. I mean, yeah. I mean, if it's working right, and there's not.
Yeah, exactly. But there are always like platforms. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. As an indie studio or an indie company from Dorland, what do you do to try and stand out?
It's a good question. I
know Jeff was really, really thoughtful this week.
Very, very
good.
I mean, I think you. How can I answer that? I mean, obviously, it's like, okay, well, you want to make something unique. I think for games in general, like just the way that people see them, it's like so visual. Like people see the screenshots, they like, they'll read the copy, the description of the game, but like if you have a really good screenshot that has some unique art, or like, people can kind of like imagine, okay, maybe there's a unique story or this unique gameplay. Like if they can look at something and kind of like infer what it is and feel gravitated towards by that, like I think that's the most important thing that you can do to get people interested in your game.
Yeah.
But I don't know exactly the magic formula for that, but like,
yes. Once again, if I could just answer that perfectly, like, yeah, this would be our live stream. No, but to answer your question from like a different angle, like also in terms of getting yourself stood out by others, developing relationships both with other game companies, but also with like any middleware or platforms that you use. So like, we've had a pretty long, despite being a tiny studio, we've had like a very like strong relationship with Epic Games, and like you can be on a stream like this if you've been like doing stuff and showing off the engine and writing blog posts and everything, and showing people that you can make a game that looks like a cartoon with Unreal. So like that, build those relationships. Like Patrick's done streams for like Houdini, because he's so cool at that stuff. And so there will be even though we're a small indie studio, it'll be like Insomniac and like another AAA studio and then him. And like that's super cool as someone who's kind of on the outside of that to see. So showing off your skills and developing relationships with other companies is like a more like practical advice I can give, is like just put yourself out there. I mean, community managers and evangelists are like always like people who are being positive and have cool stuff to show, because that's like kind of your job, is to find that stuff. So make it easy to find and show it to people and develop those relationships.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for making my job easier. Really appreciate it. You got cool stuff to share. It's great. I have one question that I would like to, this is going to be our last question for today.
Okay.
And from Rempinel, I don't know how to say their name, sorry. what do you like most about your game dev experience so far?
Oh wow,
That's a really
it's such,
that's a good
such
one.
a sweet question.
I know,
I can
right?
personally say that the coolest thing for me is just to be able to make an idea and have it come to light and have people play it, and not everyone like it, but like at least some people. That's definitely the most rewarding part for me, just being able to like work on something that you're really into and that you're really excited about.
Yeah, I would echo that. And then from like the indie perspective, like being on this journey with Patrick for like the last 2.5 years, I love being in a position where we're making our thing and like doing, like having worked at like big companies or stuff like that before this, like having sort of control over my own life, even though it's a lot scarier, is really cool.
Yes.
And I think that's like something that a lot of people are fighting for in their lives. And I feel extremely privileged to have even a modicum of that in mine.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I'm glad this journey has been exciting, if not scary sometimes for you, but Dodo Peaks is awesome, and I hope you all at home will check it out and download it, and check out what your Endless Runner mode is. This year, right? It was released earlier this year.
Yeah. Early spring, I think.
What is time?
What is time?
Who
It's
knows?
still like 2020, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. So you can see more about Dodo Peak at dodopeak.com. Your website itself, is movingpieces.io, and then
Yes.
You can find Shoulders of Giants there. Sky's doing awesome and linking these all in chat too. So, but you can also follow
Thank you.
on Twitter at Shoulders of G. And yeah, is there anything you'd like to leave them with before I do my little outro spiel?
Just wanted to say thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you all for watching.
Right.
We're still like pretty new to this whole game development thing, so thanks for listening to what we had to say, and hope you guys all got something out of it.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. This is actually, it's really nice to sit down and just hear about your journey. A lot of times we're diving into the editor and getting into the nitty gritty, but this has been a little bit of a change of pace, but really wonderful. And again, like your effects are still really awesome. So really love getting to see a bit of both. So yeah, make sure to follow them, keep up on their awesome work. We're really excited to see your progress on Shoulders of Giants. From the Unreal Engine side, stay up to date on everything Unreal Engine at unrealengine.com. We're on all the social channels /Unreal Engine or at Unreal Engine, whichever sites are following that way. If you're looking for people to talk to or you have questions, always hit the forums.unrealengine.com. This VOD, if you need to go back and see how they were making those effects or want to review some of our questions, you can always watch them here on Twitch or at YouTube, at our YouTube channel. So we have a little survey if you want to let us know what you thought of the stream, if you're interested in sharing with us requests for future events. And then, until next week, I think we have Intel on to talk about GPA and get ready for that. So thank you so much, Kyle and Patrick. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
thanks everybody for all the great questions this week. They were really phenomenal. And have a wonderful week, everyone.
All right.